Can we finally understand women? I mean, as a woman myself, I go through these intense swings throughout the month where one week I'm super energetic, joyful, and ready to take on the world, and then the next week I'm crawling through life and want to snap at anything and anybody who just slightly irritates me. Does any of that sound familiar to you? This video is going to give an explanation, well, as best I can give an explanation as to why these swings might occur, how we can track them and predict them, and then how we can kind of arrange how we live our life, how we eat, how we exercise around those different moods or those different weeks. And gentlemen, this could be the thing that helps you understand how to approach your lovely lady. So stay tuned, don't go anywhere, all right? For those who don't know, I am Coach Bree T. I am an ISSA certified personal trainer and a precision nutrition certified nutrition coach. And in case you didn't know what you were watching, you're watching Holy Health, episode 7. When I was 10-ish years old, I was in the kitchen ranting to my mom about something that happened at school, and I emphasized my point that I was making with finishing my sentence by saying, period. Like, this really sucks, and I can't stand it, period. Like, this is it, right? And my mom's reaction, clearly, she did not hear a word I said, because her reaction was, oh my gosh, did you start having your period? I was so confused. The only period that I knew of was the one you put at the end of a sentence, like the one I was talking about in that instance, or like a time period or a class period, you know what I'm saying? So she had to explain a little bit, and it went something like this. It's something that women go through, and you're getting close to that age. Basically, it's going to just be a little bit of blood in your underwear or in the toilet paper when you go to the bathroom, and you're just going to put on a pad like this, and it's going to be okay. It'll happen for a few days, and then it'll be over, and you just got to deal with it every month. That's not how my mom sounds, but it's me trying to differentiate the voices. And to be honest, that was completely unhelpful because my expectations were set super low. So when I had more than just a little bit of blood in my underwear or in the toilet paper, I don't even remember exactly where I was, what I was doing, I thought I was dying. I thought something was wrong. And the crazy part is, the doctor, and even in my mom's generation, the doctors never explained any of this to us. It was just something that you kind of got thrown into the fire of. And I'm not going to lie, even ovulation threw me off. When I started having cervical fluid, now I know what it's called, of course, but when I had cervical fluid showing up, I was like, is something wrong with me? Am I sick? Do I have a disease? Because I just didn't know. So yeah, so I was today-ish years old when I discovered all that I'm about to tell you. I know I'm not alone in the not knowing what we should know about how our bodies work as women. So, here it goes. First thing I am currently learning, and I'm still learning, so I might not get this perfect, just know that, but do your research for yourself, kind of figure out what to do. But women don't run on a daily cycle, a circadian rhythm the way that men do. We still have a circadian rhythm, but we don't reset every day. Like, a man can go throughout his day, go to sleep, wake up, and he's completely reset and ready for the day. Us women, we have a, sleep-wake cycle every day, like men do. However, we don't bounce back overnight like they do. We take a whole month-long process called our menstrual cycle. Well, we'll call it the lady cycle because it's more than just the menstrual part. They call it an infradian rhythm rather than a circadian rhythm because it lasts more than a day. It takes us longer to reset. So anyway, we got to think in terms of a month-long process rather than a 24-hour process. So here's 4 phases within this month. And yes, it has to do with our menstrual cycle, our ovulation, and all of that. The first phase of this cycle is the menstruation cycle, the one where we bleed. Gross. Blah. The first day of that cycle is the first day of a full flow. Ladies, you know what that means. Is the first day of this cycle. This is going to last about 5 to 7 days, depending on the woman. If it lasts outside of that or less than that, you might want to talk to your doctor. Let's call it the winter cycle. All right. I heard some chick talk about it being like the 4 seasons, right? So this is the winter cycle or the winter phase of the cycle. And personally, I like to call it the hibernation phase because I typically find myself in bed, covered in blankets and pillows, and hiding from the world as much as I possibly can, taking as many naps as I possibly can. And I'm going to go over like what your food, what your nutrition, and what your fitness should look like during this time a little bit later. But the second phase of this cycle is the follicular phase. So when we are about to ovulate, our egg is getting ready to drop. This starts the day after your period and ends in the ovulation phase or after the ovulation phase. It's like weird, like the second and third phases are kind of like mixed together. But anyway, you can also think of this phase as the spring phase when you start to feel better. The flowers are blooming, the sun is shining brighter, and you're more happier, lighter. You feel more attractive. Maybe you're more creative. And I mean, personally, I do my best creative work during this time, or I have more energy during this time for sure. So if you are trying to get pregnant, this is the time to put in the work to make those babies. If you are not trying to get pregnant, you should be waiting until 2 to 3 days after the next phase, which is the ovulation phase. In other words, summertime. This is usually on or around day 14 of our cycles, the phase where our egg officially drops and can be fertilized by the sperm. And another side note here, sperm only lives up to 5 days in a woman's body. Okay, we'll just put it that way. So the 5 days leading up to ovulation, which lasts about a day, are the only 5 days in which you can get pregnant. What? It's like natural birth control. And if you watched my last video, you know my qualms with hormonal birth control. So if you are on that and it's just simply to not have babies, I would suggest getting off of it. But do your research on how to get off of it properly, because just quitting it cold turkey is not a good idea. Speaking from experience. So all you have to do is know when you ovulate, and if you're trying not to get pregnant, count 2 to 3 days after your ovulation, and then you're fine. However, I would like to point out that I highly suggest not having intercourse outside of marriage. God designed intercourse to be enjoyed between a man and a woman who are under a marital covenant. Intercourse is something beautiful, something special, a gift from God. And anything outside of the marital covenant, anything that's intercourse related that's done outside of the marital covenant is an abomination to God. Now, if you don't believe in God, I know you don't care. But the physical, mental, and emotional consequences and the spiritual consequences, whether or not you believe that the spiritual realm exists, it does, okay? it doesn't wait for you to come around and believe it. It actually loves the fact that you don't acknowledge that it's there. And if you do acknowledge that it's there, and you're on the other side of the spectrum where you're like, I have a spirit guide and I'm in the new age practices, I'm doing witchcraft, run. Seek Jesus. Find Jesus as fast as you can, because you are literally being influenced by demons. They're making you think that you feel good, you feel better, but you're going to have to give so much of yourself to that. And I mean, yes, I give my whole life and my whole being to Jesus, but it's at my own free will, right? These demons are going to start asking you to pay them a little something, something, whatever that may be. Your blood, sacrificing a baby, crazy thing. I know, crazy things. It's going to escalate and it's going to be bad. And then you're going to become a slave to that. In fact, you're already a slave. So just run away and seek Jesus as fast as you possibly can. But I digress. There's this thing called soul ties, and I could go into that super deeply, but ultimately, spiritually, you can be tied and exposed to demonic influence, and you're going to face depression, you're going to face all kinds of stuff, because it's just not natural. Certain things that are not, like, the things that are not natural are ultimately going to cause some kind of spiritual, emotional, physical damage to you. Whether or not you choose to accept that that's happening, you might feel happy in the moment, you might feel comfort in the moment, but it's not going to last. It never does. Anyway, the fourth and last phase of our cycle is called the luteal phase. This is a 2-ish week time period leading up to the start of the next cycle or your period. And here's where you start to notice that your energy plummets and you are much snappier and more emotional than usual. Think of this like it's fall. The days are getting shorter, the clouds are polluting the sky, and a lack of sunlight has a slowly declining in energy. And this may be a good time to brainstorm some new projects that you want to work on or something, but not actually do the projects. However, do not neglect your daily job. Is not what I'm saying. I'm not saying, oh, show up to work for 2 weeks and you just act like, oh, I can't do anything. Like, don't be like that. Still do your daily job, but just give grace to yourself. And maybe you have to explain to your boss, like, listen, my mind isn't functioning as well right now. Just give me like 3 weeks and I'll be back. Like, 3 weeks of just bleh, and I'll be back on track. Like, I'll catch it up. I know it sounds crazy. 3 weeks we're miserable. In 1 week we are like, yeah. The first week of this phase is actually not that bad. It's just you start to see yourself decline. But yeah, give yourself grace during this time, because the storm's going to pass and you're going to feel better very soon. So along with those 4 phases, there are different fluctuations in our hormones, and I'm not 100% like well versed in this, so this is my best explanation. So phase 1, during menstruation, we see estrogen and progesterone pretty dominant. Progesterone keeps estrogen in check, and because if estrogen takes over, it can cause a lot of inflammation and a lot of discomfort, a lot of mood swings, and us endometriosis girlies know what that is like, because endometriosis is basically having too much estrogen and not enough progesterone. So we're more inflamed, we're more moody, and we're in a lot more pain. Phase 2 is the follicular phase, where we start to see an increase in estrogen. I know this sounds weird because I just said having too much estrogen makes you moody and emotional and whatnot in the last phase. But during this particular phase, you actually want your estrogen to be high, which is going to boost your mood and going to, make things a little bit better for trying to make babies. Wink, wink. Phase 3 is ovulation, where we see a spike in estrogen, like a huge spike. So, last phase, we're just kind of like increasing estrogen a little bit. And then at ovulation, you hit a spike in your estrogen, like your peak. And then your luteinizing hormone is up as well. And this is all for the sake of your fertility and being able to like make a baby, essentially. All right, phase 4, progesterone, which, what is phase 4? Phase 4, the luteal phase, progesterone takes over, and estrogen and luteinizing hormone are meant to decrease. This switch can cause a huge energy drop and some negative mood shifts just because we're fluctuating again. I mean, it's just part of it, guys. Although I have heard it said that you do not have to be moody. Okay, there's ways around it. Side note, progesterone is required to be able to help a fertilized egg implant in the uterus and for the baby to be able to grow and develop in the womb over the 9 months that it's in there, which is why us endometriosis people or girlies and people with other potential fertility issues with that stem from low progesterone, like, listen, that's why we have a hard time getting pregnant. Crazy, right? And I thought the only solution was a procedure of like IVF or something similar and just as expensive. It's not. No, there's always a natural way. You just have to find it. You just have to be patient. You just have to trust the process. But I digress. Basically, there is a pattern, and all it takes is learning your cycle. When you bleed, that's easy. When you ovulate, may require an ovulation testing kit or understanding your cervical fluid. Fairly inexpensive, but after that, it's pretty simple. I mean, Clear Blue makes an affordable ovulation testing kit. And iPhone's health app has a cycle tracker built into it that also has a place to indicate your ovulation test results. Wild. It's crazy. So I highly suggest you take the time to learn your cycle. This is the first step into understanding yourself as a woman and understanding how you can structure your weeks and months to fit with your body and can do what your body can do best at whatever time of the phase or whatever phase you are in during the month. And more importantly, this is a way that can tell your doctors if something's going on. Like for me, I was able to track my cycle, put it down on a piece of paper and share it with my OBGYN, and she was like, "Oh, you might be low on progesterone. 1, you have endometriosis. 2, your cycle's kind of short. It should be 28 days, but you're on like 23, 24 days. So this is pretty short." And I mean, you have to have at least 28 days, like 26, 27, 28 days is good in order for the egg to implant properly in your uterus if you're trying to get pregnant. But it just is a sign of overall menstrual health or reproductive health. And apparently my reproductive health is suffering because of a lot of factors. So they were able to determine that my progesterone was low. And I mean, it can tell you so much more. Like, it can tell you so much more about your cycle. So go see a functional medicine OBGYN and start digging, okay? And to give an example of how to treat each phase, I used the winter, spring, summer, and fall references earlier, and I heard the chick I mentioned earlier explain, and she was on Alex Clark's channel if you want to go scroll through her library and figure out which video it is. I can't remember off the top of my head. If I can find it, I'll post it below. But Alex Clark's channel, Tongue Twister, she did an interview with this girl, and she was talking about how to eat and how to treat fitness during these phases. For instance, the menstruation phase, the winter phase, you eat foods that are heartier and warm, like soup, pasta, stuff that you would eat in the winter time. During the spring and summer phases, you can eat refreshing and lighter foods like watermelon, salads with chicken salad. I love chicken salad shake, etc. During the fall phase, definitely load up on red meats. This is going to help with your iron production during your cycle because you're bleeding a lot, so you're pretty much anemic for a week. But helps with the iron production. Also, stay hydrated. Load up on those electrolytes. Get some coconut water. Put some salt on your tongue. Drink the water or regular water. What I do is I go to flavcity.com. It's owned by Bobby Parrish, and he has electrolyte sticks that are pretty clean. I know Dr. Mike Mutzel also has some electrolyte sticks as well that are really good. So there are plenty of sources that you can go find. And I think Dr. Mike Mutzel's is like Myoscience with instead of an S, an X, or something like that. I am not sponsored, by the way, by any of these people. It's just, yeah. Anyway, so get hydrated and eat some saltier foods, but also heartier foods. However, I find in this phase, if I eat a good steak salad or steak tacos, I feel great. Steak always helps me feel great. I love steak. I love steak. I would eat steak every day if I could. But it's expensive. So we cut it down to right before my period. And then we eat ground beef the rest of the time. And chicken. Anyway, so she also talked about adjusting your workouts accordingly. So in the first phase, don't push yourself. Your energy is low. If you do have it in you, go for it. Just make sure it's a light workout, like body weight exercises, or personally, I just go for walks. Like that's about all I can give. I don't have much to give. If I'm going to make it through work, I got to make it through that first. So I gotta be able to rest enough, of course. In the second and third phase, you can go hard. You can do your heaviest lifting, HIIT workouts, anything you want to. Go for serious runs during this time because your energy is up, you're feeling good, and your body needs it. So take advantage of this energized time period. In the fourth phase, you can actually split it into 2 weeks, as I mentioned earlier, where the first week you can go a little harder on your workouts, and then the second week, because your energy drops a little bit lower or makes its big plummet, I should say, you would need to go lighter. Like for instance, the first week of this phase, I go pretty normal on my workouts because I feel like I can do a pretty normal job. I feel like I'm still pretty energized, depending. In some months it varies, but for the most part, I feel pretty normal for the first of the 2 weeks, and then the second part of the 2 weeks is when I start to kind of drop the weights, maybe, or if I keep the same weights, I might just do less sets. So instead of doing 3 sets, I do 2 sets, and I might cut an exercise out of each circuit. And kind of make it more concise. That way, I can get something done, but I'm not just being a blob. It just depends on how I'm feeling overall. But to break it down, God didn't mess up when he made us women. He didn't. And maybe Eve eating the fruit from the forbidden tree of the knowledge of good and evil, like maybe the curse that came with that kind of has something to do with it. But yeah, so yeah, definitely has something to do with it. However, God has provided us with exactly what we need to be able to overcome the curse that is painful childbearing, which painful childbearing doesn't just come from actually giving birth or carrying a baby in your womb. It doesn't have to suck. It really doesn't. If you do what God intended, it doesn't suck. In fact, two things that all we have to do is choose these two things. And that number one is to follow Jesus with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength. Love the Lord our God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength. And second, to steward our bodies that He created, the bodies that God created in His image, to steward them in a way that brings Him honor and glory, the way that He designed for them, the way He intended for them to be fueled and to be taken care of. I mean, these bodies have the ability to heal themselves when we put the right things into our bodies and take the right things out. In other words, living in holy health. If that makes sense to you, give this video a like, subscribe, leave a comment, ring the bell notification to stay up to date on future episodes talking about faith, fitness, and food. And if none of it makes sense to you, still like, subscribe, leave a comment with your questions if you want to. I'm happy to try to answer. And ring that bell notification so you can also stay up to date on future videos that might actually just end up answering your questions anyway. Anyway, I will see y'all next time. Grace and peace.